Hi, my name is Ryan and I have selected the topic that I will speak about educational disparity between Indigenous people as opposed to non-Indigenous people in Australia. This topic is very interesting to me as non-Indigenous people hardly receive much recognition in schools. I will further make awareness of identifying issues, policies and statistics and strategies that are faced between Indigenous as opposed to non-Indigenous. What is educational disparity? In educational systems, there are many problems that are faced in schools or any forms of educational provisions. Educational disparity refers to the disadvantageous and unequal distribution of academic resources, performance, involvement, and learning abilities in schools. This disparity occurs very frequently during schools, relatively to my topic that is encompassed by Indigenous children. Educational disadvantages occurs when students are prevented from reaching their academic potential at schools due to external factors in their life which they have no control over. Identify the current educational policy. Are we focusing on the disparity between the provisions of Aboriginal children as opposed to non-Indigenous children and how this affects children's learning outcomes, which tends to be historically disadvantaged subject and oppressed? To tackle this, policies are implemented. The current policy for the area of topic is Aboriginal educational policies. These policies are implemented by the New South Wales Department of Education, which focuses on the future learning experiences and development for optimal success for the Indigenous community. This policy targets not only students, but thrives as learners and leaders. Regular monitoring to ensure achievements of Aboriginal children. This will establish opportunities but also maintain effective, respectful and collaborative relationships with Aboriginal parents and communities. Identify what issues there are perceived to be with the current policy and how this might relate to it. Democracy, citizenship and ethics. There are many issues that arise during schools for Indigenous students in early childhood, such as socioeconomic disparities, level of remoteness, lack of teaching, lack of Indigenous education in schools curriculum, family background, culture and indigeneity. Socioeconomic disparity and level of remoteness. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people are more likely to live in remote areas of Australia compared to non-Indigenous people. According to Australian Bureau of Statistics, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people were 12 times likely to live in remote areas, and 7 out of 10 non-Indigenous people live in major cities, more than double the proportion of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people. The level of remoteness affects children's learning ability as they are consistently outperformed by metropolitan students due to their growing up. This educational disadvantage is faced by many Indigenous students who reside from out of metropolitan areas. Low socioeconomic backgrounds are a factor due to parents not affording their children with school fees, transport fees, uniform fees, and this is an issue for Indigenous students, which result into low attendance, therefore affecting their long-term future success of employment. Low socioeconomic affects them access to resources, health services and facilities, not affording private schools along with not providing tutoring. All this leads to the result of poor academic performances and achievements. As a result, low attendance in schools leading inequality disadvantage compared to non-Indigenous, and they live in metropolitan areas with also access to services and programs. The lack of quality of teaching, lack of Indigenous culture in school curriculum. The National Report to Parliament on Indigenous Education Training claims that poor school attendance is most accounting for a disparity between Indigenous and non-Indigenous literacy and numeracy outcome. This relates to the lack of recognition by schools of the Indigenous culture and history. It is the lack of teachers putting effort into teaching all children the history of Indigenous culture. It is also linked to the staff lack of knowledge in Indigenous culture. They need more professional development and training for their Aboriginal education, so they educate the students with a range of cultural perspective to schools. Another issue is lack of Aboriginal teachers employed. Dr. Rigney highlights that there is no greater higher education recruitment strategy than young Indigenous school students being taught by Indigenous teachers. By having good and engaged teachers will encourage the Indigenous students to attend school and increase their learning. This lack of teachers not performing Indigenous culture into school curriculum has led to low educational achievement in schools. Due to not performing and attending, therefore leads to poor results in NAPLAN. It is shown that the average Indigenous students achieve lower scores than their non-Indigenous peers. Democracy. In Australia, the government have control over the schools, but along with curriculum, that needs to be taught in schools. They will implement a series of strategies and policies to improve the outcomes of well-being of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island students in order to excel in their education. They implement Aboriginal education training policy to increase the knowledge and understanding of histories, culture, and experience of Aboriginal people. They put in place the National Aboriginal Torres Strait Island Strategy and also New South Wales Government plans for Aboriginal affairs in order to bring recognition and provide all staff about Aboriginal Australians. However, it is with government control rights and ideas that these policies have been recognised. It is tied to the liberal democratic ideas and function of government morals, values and responsibilities and social cohesion. Hence, we still see low attendance and low literacy and numeracy results among Indigenous students as opposed to non-Indigenous people. Further illustrating that these policies are under government control instead of involving Indigenous points of views in ways of improving their learning performance. According to Elwood highlights, it needs to take into the account of children's rights in education, their right to be listened to, respected, to learn through day-to-day experiences about the meaning of democracy and human rights. The Australian government are working with the state government and Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders with the closing gap for greater increased achievements for university entries and level of education qualification, leaving them at a disadvantage. Why? Because there is a gap in the performance between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. This will result in Indigenous with lack of school funding by location, remoteness, and then the non-Indigenous who live in metropolitan areas. Citizenship and ethics. The government have strategies put in place such as creating Future Together program to achieve full potentials, build economic and social prosperity that are present informed citizens to our society. Due to issues such as socio-economic disparity, remoteness in culture, and lack of quality in curriculums, the government have implemented strategies to recognise all citizens' rights. The government should implement rule-based and end-based thinking approach in order to adhere and benefit ways to resolve dilemmas and prevent harm to Aboriginal students. It is a concept of ethics that advocates the use of situational ethics and ethics of care which remove inequality within a classroom. The New South Wales Department of Education will accomplish the equality that needs to be applied in order for the Indigenous students to have the same access as non-Indigenous students, providing school funds, embedding Aboriginal language, and reform arrangement to all students in Australia have the opportunity to support the children who need the most. This will therefore foster the well-being of all children interacting with different cultures, social and economic status. This will in order to build, maintain relationships. There are many strategies and approaches I have come up with. Get elderlies into schools to teach. Elderlies, I mean by Aboriginal elderlies. This will be effective implementation in maximum Aboriginal children's achievement. This teacher-student connection will increase their learning abilities and much more involving into the studies. Government should be implementing a school just for Indigenous children, acknowledging their culture, identity and spiritual well-being. This will therefore contribute to a positive behaviour and students attending and achieving and engaging. The New South Wales Department of Education should implement a program so teachers undertake ongoing professional learning to increase their learning towards the diverse of Aboriginal students, utilizing based teaching approach. During school hours, develop a class led by an Indigenous teacher. For Indigenous students to come together and express themselves such as scripture to ensure all Indigenous are included, maintain friendship, and if they need help with homework, the teacher can help them. Increase funding through Commonwealth investments so students can access all resources, transport facilities and health services. This will increase student attendance, increase the development in literacy and numeracy. Provide a school program to help Indigenous parents in learning. This means working in partnership with the Indigenous parents in meeting their needs. This will be effective as parents will have gained knowledge from these classes and result in teaching their children and helping them with their homework. Provide high quality education for Indigenous children in early childhood education care, which will strive them on early path of success to be confident and build on their social and emotional skills along with cognitive skills. Adding more Indigenous culture in the New South Wales education curriculum is another strategy. Another strategy is to create an Aboriginal festival or national day once or twice a year to celebrate Aboriginal culture. Festivals should include such as storytelling, food stores, paintings in schools, which will generate all cultures to learn something significant about their Aboriginal heritage and historical culture. Us Australians need to focus more to improve their learning abilities and implement strategies to overcome these disparities and receive ultimate goal towards equality for the Indigenous